In a jungle far away, there lived two best friends, a crafty dog and a foolish cat. They lived together in a house carved under a gigantic tree and spent their days frolicking around the forest, causing mischief wherever they went. One year, the Lion King sensed an impending famine approaching the land and called a meeting of all the animals. He advised them to stock up on food to endure the harsh times ahead. The animals were thrown into a panic, and they all went above and beyond, hunting for food for their families, stocking up their corn bowls, bone sacks, and barns. Some animals had to journey to a faraway village just to get enough food to store at home in preparation for the hard times ahead. The crafty dog and the foolish cat, however, scoffed and ignored the warning. The dog was too lazy to hunt for food to stock up their home. He was hoping he could use his charms and deceit to get food if a famine eventually started. Meanwhile, the cat was too foolish and relied solely on his friend for survival. So they lay by the roadside, mocking the other animals as they hurried to take home as much food as they could. When the famine inevitably struck, food became scarce, and the once bountiful forest turned barren. The other animals had prepared ahead of time and ate what they had saved, one meal at a time. It became clear to the dog and the cat that the Lion King's predictions were true, and alas, they had nothing to eat. Desperation gripped the crafty dog and the foolish cat as they wandered from house to house, begging for scraps. But the animals who had heeded the Lion King's advice and prepared turned them away, their hearts hardened by the scarcity that surrounded them. Days turned into weeks, and the famine persisted. Exhausted and hungry, the crafty dog and the foolish cat stumbled upon the tortoise's humble abode. The tortoise, renowned for his kindness and wisdom, listened to their pleas patiently. However, he informed them that he did not have much for himself and his family but could spare one piece of meat each day for anyone who could put his child to sleep. He explained that his child found it difficult to sleep and that whoever could come up with a trick to put the child to sleep would receive a piece of meat. The crafty dog and the foolish cat accepted the offer. On their way home, they agreed that whoever managed to put the child to sleep would bring home the piece of meat, and they would eat it together. The next day, the cat went first to the tortoise's house. He sang lullabies and poems in different voice tones, yet the baby tortoise did not fall asleep. After several hours, he gave up. The dog then came in and decided to tell a folktale. By the time he was halfway through the story, the baby tortoise had fallen asleep. The tortoise rewarded the dog with a piece of meat, and he left for home. He shared the meat with the cat, and although it did not fill their stomachs, they both slept happily that night. On the second day, the dog went first. Confident in his method, he told another folktale. The baby tortoise fell asleep almost immediately at the sound of his voice. He received his piece of meat and returned home to share it with the cat. On the third day, the cat went first again. This time, he decided to dance, hoping the baby tortoise would fall asleep. However, all his efforts were in vain. Bitter and frustrated, he went home and told the dog that none of his tricks were working. The dog, feeling proud, set out to make the baby tortoise fall asleep as he always did. As usual, the baby tortoise dozed off to the sound of his story, and he was given another piece of meat. However, this time, on his way home, the dog devoured the meat alone. When he got home, he lied to his best friend, telling the cat that his method had failed and that he was unable to make the baby tortoise sleep. That night, the crafty dog slept with a full stomach, while the cat went to bed hungry. On the fourth day, they both prepared to go again. The cat went first and tried all his methods, but the baby tortoise remained awake through it all. Hungry and disappointed, he returned home once more. The dog promised to try his best and bring back some food for them to share. Excitedly, the dog arrived at the tortoise's house, completed the task, took his piece of meat, and finished it on his way home. Before reaching the house, he lied again to the cat, claiming he had failed. The starving cat went to bed in tears while the dog slept soundly with his stomach full. Days passed, and the dog continued deceiving his best friend, eating the piece of meat alone while the cat starved. After a week, the cat began to suspect that the dog was lying. Every night, the dog snored heavily, a habit the cat knew only happened when his stomach was full. Determined to uncover the truth, the cat decided to spy on the dog. The next day, after failing yet again to put the baby tortoise to sleep, the cat secretly followed the dog as he set out. From a distance, he watched as the tortoise rewarded the dog with a large piece of meat. As the dog walked home, he stopped under a tree just a few meters from their house and began devouring the meat hurriedly. At that moment, the cat emerged from his hiding place and confronted his friend for lying all this time. Filled with guilt and shame, the dog admitted that he had been lying because the half piece of meat was never enough for him. Hurt and disappointed, the cat moved out of their home, leaving the dog alone. However, he had also learned the stories the dog had been telling the baby tortoise to make him fall asleep. In the days that followed, the cat began sneaking out earlier than the dog to put the baby tortoise to sleep using the same stories. The dog soon noticed this and, from then on, the two best friends became bitter enemies. They competed fiercely for crumbs of food to survive, and even to this day, cats and dogs remain rivals, attacking each other at the slightest provocation. This is the end of my story.